All righty. What's up? What's up? What's up? All right. We got an error on Facebook. Cool. All right. So I think we're good to go now. Thanks for popping in. Be sure to say hello. Be sure to hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber, definitely become a subscriber because why not? It's free. If you are, however, on Patreon, definitely check out the latest video. Nori's putting that up as we speak. It was traveling, and one of the great things about traveling is I get to see people who are also traveling, and so it's hanging out with someone I've done a lot of deals with, and was headed to meet him. This guy comes up, it's like, oh, like you're Ace. I did a deal with you back in 2015. So shout out to Kevin. I was like, how's the business going? He still owns that business from 7 years ago, and it's doing well. So we talked about, if he's going to sell it, what's his next move. But that was really cool just to randomly run into a client from 7 years ago. But it also makes me feel old. It's like, man, I've been doing this stuff for a long time. But the other great thing is, like, back in the day, I actually got to coach people not in person, but one-on-one, which doesn't happen as much. I'm helping a couple of people with their private equity fund on a one-on-one basis, which, there's some really some really cool updates that I'll update you guys on the private fund incubator. I know a lot of y'all have reached out. And basically, we're just redesigning, revamping that whole thing. So we put a pause on Peppy 6, and I think y'all are gonna be excited about just what will come in the future. I've interviewed after pausing Peppy 6. I interviewed some of the funds from before, the previous 5 funds, and just went out like, how do we make this even more effective? How do we make it so you get more out of this and you walk away from the experience, not just with one fund under your belt, but ready to do more? And so in this new iteration, I think we're going to do some cool things there, and we're going to have a live event coming up. So lots happening, but I do want to get into the power of manifesting. We never talked about this before on the channel, right? And how I leveraged that to get into really the fund that changed my life. All right, let's say hi to some folks and we'll get rolling. G Combs, what up, homie? Been a little while. Good to see you pop in and say hi. Victor comes in and said, let's go. Let me know if y'all have any questions. Awesome, Victor. Thanks for coming in. And all the way from San Francisco. Actually, I was hanging out with a friend of mine that works for one of the FANG companies, the old FANG companies, which is kind of funny because the end, Netflix, is no longer considered to be in FANG, but they got to come up with a whole new acronym because dropping the N changes the whole thing. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so one of the mistakes that I see that people make and that I made when I was first getting started with my very first fund was I wasn't able to make a move because I was really focused on the how. I'd never done a fund before, and I was just like, how is all this going to work? What happened, because I was like, I just had a lot of questions. But obviously, because I hadn't had the experience, it was nearly impossible for me, even if I researched the how and got the answer to that question, it wasn't enough for me to really have a full understanding, because private equity is something that most people you don't grow up having conversations about this. One of the things that I talk about, even when it comes to buying businesses, is, if you're buying a house, you've been around people that have bought houses. You've seen commercials for mortgages. You know what that is. You're going to go to the bank and get it. If you know somebody who's gone through that process, they've got an inspection. You know what that is. You know what an appraisal is. So all these things become a part of your vocabulary and your way of thinking. When you get into something that's just a whole new paradigm, like private equity, it's not just, okay, I've got to learn this vocabulary. I got to learn the legalities. I got to learn the way of thinking around managing a fund. And so all of these things can become really overwhelming. And it's not smart to try to know everything before you get started. And so what does that look like? When I was doing my first fund, I waited years because I basically couldn't see the end. I didn't know what was going to happen. Like I could see the next step, but I got really focused on what does this look like in the end? How's all this going to work? And like I said, even as I found the answers, it just led to more questions. And I had a mentor, fortunately, that I talked to quite a bit, and I was just telling him my hesitancy as far as getting into private equity and not really understanding it. And he just really shifted the whole way I saw the whole thing. The first thing he says, like, why don't you take a step back and just, number one, try to decide, okay, if I did do this, what would I want it to look like? Who would I want to work with? What are the investors that I'd want to raise money from? Who are the employees, and what does the team look like that I'd want to put together to help me in managing the fund? And probably one of the most important things is like, how's it going to change your life? Like, how's it going to impact your lifestyle? How's it going to impact your finances? And so getting a vision of those things, like that's the real vision. So I was focused on the vision of like, how do I want to charge the fees and all of those things? And, how do I want to structure each deal with the investors and their return? Just all of these random things, as opposed to getting a vision for the result and then working back from that vision. And most importantly, just getting clarity. And I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes, is getting too focused on how am I going to do this, and not spending enough time just focused on what do I want from this, and what do I want the result to look like. So for me, as I made that shift, I started to focus on, okay, this is what I would want if I were going to have a fund. And it's really cool too, because it becomes a great decision maker. As you just take each step, if you get to a step and you realize, oh, I can't do this. One of my things was, right now I'm overseas, obviously. And so one of my things was I want to be able to travel. As some of y'all know, I have a publicly traded company, and it was the same in that company. I'm like, okay, like part of the discussion was, we could save a lot of taxes if I was based in Puerto Rico. And, I spent time in Puerto Rico, and I knew like, nah, I can't do even 6 months a year. It's too much for me to spend in Puerto Rico. So that became a thing. It's like, is there a way around it, us, doing that? And if not, then it becomes a no. And so it's the same thing with the fund. That very first fund is like, okay, if I can't get the results that I want out of this financially, if I can't have the lifestyle that I want out of this, then it becomes a thing of like, okay, great. Now I know that I don't want to do it because it wasn't going to lead to the result that I wanted anyway. So it's so funny, and it sounds so simple, but I tell you, I talk to people obviously all the time who reach out interested in starting their own fund. And we've helped, at this point, 5 different funds get started, and all 5 have completed at this point a couple of deals. Obviously the earlier ones have done many deals, but everybody in those 5 funds have raised the fund, put together capital, and closed deals. And none of them had any experience coming into that, and it represents close to 30 people that are getting that experience for the very first time. So as I talk to those folks and they're just getting started, I realized that the how can be overwhelming, and it just doesn't help. So you've got to focus, and it's funny because I didn't get to that conclusion through necessarily The Secret or learning about manifesting, but I do think that is a part of it. It's not as much foo-foo, it's just science. It's like you've got to get a very clear vision of what you want in order to get there. So whether you believe that it's magical or whatever, or it's just going to be the law of attraction and it's going to come to you, doing the exercise of it is important. And then really, which is one of the probably the more interesting things is I think a lot of people think that the how is the most important. And I would just say, not only is it not the most important, it can be a detriment because it's going to create doubt. It's going to give you this doubt because you don't know, you've never been on that journey. So it can keep you from taking the journey because you can't see each step. You've got to start taking those steps. And so it's really, and The Secret talks about that, but it's just so important to have your focus on the result of where you're going, as opposed to having your focus on, okay, like how is it going to happen, and not so much that doubt is going to do this magical thing and in that result. Whether you believe that or not, the truth is, it's going to make you less likely to do the work that's necessary because you can't be divided. You can't have a portion of you that's like, oh, I want this result. And then the other 50% of you is like, yeah, but do you know how it's going to happen and what's going to happen? What about this? What if this takes place and you don't know how to respond to that? And what if an investor asks you this question and you don't know the answer? And, if you have that combating inside of you, you're just not going to have 100%, by the law of percentages. If you've got 50% over here that really wants it, or if you've got 80%, but then you've got this other 20% that is full of doubt and questions and hows, it is just, means that you're not going to have 100% of yourself that is focused on achieving that goal. And I can tell you, you want to have 100%. You want to be able to give 100% when you're doing something that is very, very new. So I think part of this that I like is, what ends up happening is you realize I've got to become this person in order to achieve this goal. And so the more that you're focused on that result, it also leads to, okay, I can, this is who I need to be in order to get that result. And so I think that's secondly, if you can focus on where you want to go. And then the second thing, instead of the how, it's who do I need to be? Here's where I'm going and who do I need to be to get there? And if you focus on that, on those two things, the how is just a very distant third to getting there. And it just starts to come together. I think about my very first fund, and even as I'm doing deals now and funds, you get to be more and more creative if you're going into it with, just the excitement of, okay, I get to learn. I'm going to be this type of person. I'm going to head towards this result. And everything I do, it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not, because it's leading me in the direction. Every mistake, I'm able to learn from it, and it's leading me in the direction of the result that I want. So I'm encouraging you, throw how out the window, get really focused on the end goal, and get really focused on becoming the person that's going to be able to get to that end goal. All right, let's get a couple of questions, and then I know it's Monday. I'm going to let y'all get back to work today. All right, we got Tam. There we go. So Tam pops in. She says, "Can you touch on setting up a private foundation as part of a private equity fund? I have a tech mission that I'm already doing, but converting to a private foundation." So there are a couple ways to do that. My family has a foundation that we put together, and we're doing some really cool things in honor of my dad who passed away a few years ago. But the most important part of this is generating ROI. When you look at endowments are a great example of this. What you want to have, and it becomes this really cool partnership. You look at something like Harvard, where they've built billions and billions of dollars in endowment. Well, basically it's a fund. It's run by fund managers. So you're managing these funds as a fund. But the most important part is, if you have a private equity fund and then you've got your foundation, you want to make sure that you're only taking the returns from your private equity fund and funding the foundation. That's what allows you to, never go away. Your foundation is always funded. Now, maybe at the beginning there starts to be constraints, but if you can even, I love the idea which some funds have done, where they are tying the two together as they approach investors. And so instead of approaching an investor and saying, hey, I've got to raise money and I'm going to spend all that money this year. You say you have a technician, let's say it's teaching underserved communities about programming. So I'm going to go out and do that work. And in one case, if you're just focused on doing the work and don't have the private equity fund, I'm going to do that work this year, and then I'm going to be back next year to get more money. But when you have this endowment / private equity fund strategy, you can say, hey, yeah, you could put money into the foundation, and I'm happy to accept that. But here's another option where you'll get a whatever 8%, 10% preferred return, but everything after that goes into the foundation, and now you're able to fund this vision forever, as opposed to it being just this one time and I'll see you next year. So that's the approach that personally I would take. I think if I'm interested in the cause, that to me is more appealing, that you're going to have the sustainability, as opposed to what most nonprofits end up having to do, which is every year they're back at the table, raising capital and all that. All right, Ahmed, thanks for popping in from LinkedIn. We want to get as many comments. I got to get more active over on LinkedIn. Thanks for popping in. He says, love it. Great thoughts on approach and what focus should look like. Thank you, sir. I certainly appreciate it. Tim says, absolutely. That is what the goal is. Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming in. Hope you all are having a productive start to your week. If you're interested in learning more about this, feel free to join Patreon. If you want to get on the list, we're in a pause right now with getting started on incubating new funds. But especially as we're wrapping up some of the 5 before 1 and 2 are closed. So we got these 3. I want to get 3 and 4 closed, and then we'll be off to the races. So if you're interested in joining that list, go to acechapman.com. Be one of the first that we accept into the future incubator. And be sure to subscribe. Hit me on Instagram, ace.chapman, all the stuff, all the socials. Have a great one. Talk to y'all soon.